AI's replacement of 300 million jobs worldwide, human intelligence versus artificial intelligence, and the future of supply chain management. Those are just a few things we'll cover here today on episode number 121 of Transformation Ground Control.
This is Transformation Ground Control, your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. This is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including strategy, people, process, and technology. And my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And excited for our episode here today. We're going to cover a lot of great and interesting topics. We're going to start off with some questions from the audience, social media in particular, where we receive many questions on a daily basis, and we've cherry-picked a few of those to cover here today. So we're going to get into some Q&A from the audience here to start, and then also in our opening segment, we'll cover some hot topics, including the fact that AI, according to a new study, could replace up to 300 million jobs worldwide. So we'll talk about that article and what some of the trends or the predictions are for the future of artificial intelligence and the impact on the workforce. We're also going to talk about supply chain maturity and how important it is to understand your current level of supply chain maturity and sustainability in your supply chain management efforts. And then we're also going to talk about wedding technology. So for those of you that are interested in the personal use of technology, in particular wedding technology, we're going to talk a little bit about that here in the opening segment as well. And then later in the show, we will have our first guest, Noush, Bayat, who's going to be on and chatting with me about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So we're going to sort of talk about the human aspect of digital transformation, and in particular, how the intersection or the combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence will be so important going forward in the future. And then finally, later in the show, we'll have Dr. Muddassir Ahmed joining us for a discussion around the future of supply chain management. So we're going to play you a clip from an interview that we actually did on this podcast with Dr. Ahmed last year. So we're going to replay that clip because it's a very good and timely topic as it relates to supply chain management. But before we get to those discussions and those specific topics, we'll cover a few questions from the audience here. And for those of you that don't know, every week on this show, we have a segment now where we open up with questions that we've received on social media. So if you follow me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or if you're listening to the audio podcast platform on one of the audio platforms, you can drop questions for me in the chat, and we'll get to those questions here in this podcast every week. So the first topic we wanted to cover here is a question that was from, I believe, my YouTube channel, where I talk about the the difference between standard versus customized software. And so if you haven't seen it, there's a YouTube video I post on my YouTube channel where it's about a 10-minute video, and I just talk about the pros and cons of standard off-the-shelf software and the pros and cons of customizing standard off-the-shelf software, and really helping organizations better navigate that decision process of trying to figure out when and where or if we should customize our standard software. And this question was related to that video or appeared on that video. And the comment is, upgrades and decommissioning are required in ERP environments. The system will be easy to upgrade with standard software. It is very difficult to do with a custom solution. And that's a great point, and it is something that I talk about in the video, is that when you do customization, so let me just back up and explain what customization means if you're not aware. When you deploy any sort of standard off-the-shelf technology, you have to configure it, right? You have to set it up, you have to personalize it, you make decisions, you click buttons around how a workflow is going to work, what fields you need to enter, how the data flows through the system. A lot of setup and configuration that needs to happen to make off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box software work. However, you also have another option with many of the software providers where you can use their tool set to actually customize the software. And customization is really a more invasive version of configuration. You're doing more than just the basic setup of the software. When you're getting into customization, now you're getting into actually changing the code of the software and essentially changing the software to do something that it wasn't designed or intended to do. So when you do that, it does a couple things. When you customize software, it does a couple things. First of all, it delays a project, or it adds more time and money to the project. It adds more risk to the project because now you're running the risk of essentially breaking the software or trying to get it to do something that it wasn't built to do. And then you also have the issues of difficulty surviving upgrades or getting upgrades to the software. So when you do make changes and you customize the software, if there's a new version of the software that comes out, oftentimes that customization won't survive that upgrade, and you have to rewrite that customization or figure out how you're going to navigate that. So that's what this person is referring to, I presume, is that latter piece of it, which is difficult to maintain a custom solution, and that is absolutely true. And on the surface, it sounds like, well, then why would you customize? Why in the world would you ever consider customizing if it's going to create all these risks that I just described? Well, the problem is, especially with ERP systems are trying to be everything to everyone within an organization. It's one system that's trying to tie together an entire set of operations workflows. Great concept in theory, but a lot easier said than done. What ends up happening is no ERP system is going to be a perfect fit for every organization out there. And typically every organization is going to have a mix of decisions they have to make, or a mix of decisions that they make to address the deficiencies or the mismatches between what the software can do and what they want the software to do. One option is you change your business processes. You change your processes, your people to fit the software. That's one way to navigate it and say, we're just not going to customize. We're going to change our processes, change our people, and that's going to be how we address this. Nothing wrong with that. That works in many cases, but there's going to be other cases where it's just not realistic to do that. There's going to be situations where you're missing or you're watering down some sort of competitive advantage that you have as an organization, and you have a need to customize the software potentially. And so that becomes the million-dollar question is it worth it for us to do that? Is it worth taking on the risk that this person describes? And that's a tough decision that every organization has to make. But there's also risk to not customizing. When you don't customize the software, you run the risk of the software. Yes, it works. It's more simple. You've mitigated that risk of customization, but now you've just shifted the risk over to the business operations. And if the business operations can't function or can't function well with software as it's designed off the shelf out of the box, then that creates a whole nother set of risks and problems. And for many organizations, in some cases, they find that risk is greater than the risk of customization. So that's really the sort of the ROI analysis you have to do, and you have to objectively look at, what are the trade-offs there for my organization. And you probably come up with different answers for different parts of your business. There might be some parts of your business where you say, we can live with the software the way it is. Let's force our people and processes to change to fit the software. But then there's going to be other cases where, we can't live with that. That's our competitive advantage. That's our secret sauce. That's our differentiator in the marketplace. So therefore, we are going to customize the software in the name of preserving and building on and enhancing that competitive advantage. So that's a way to think about it. It's a lot easier said than done, but that's the million-dollar question is, how do you know when you need to customize? And if you go to my YouTube channel, by the way, just search customization on my YouTube channel, you'll find that video. It's a video that was just published in the last 30 days, I believe. So you can find that there. So another question I want to get to that is very relevant to today's episode, because we are going to talk about, in our Hot Topic segment in just a moment, we're going to talk about regenerative AI, such as ChatGPT, and the impact it's going to have on the industry and the potential displacement of hundreds of millions of jobs worldwide. We're going to come back to that in the Hot Topics. But this question is a question that we received in our social media channels. And the question is, please could you share more about the impact of ChatGPT on the digital transformation consulting industry, specifically SAP S/4HANA professional and change management consulting? So I'll just address it more broadly. This is not relevant just to SAP consulting or even just change management. I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of just technology and digital transformation in general. And I think these comments are relevant to certainly SAP S/4HANA deployments, as well as any other sort of ERP or software digital transformation deployment. And to really unpack this a bit, What I'd say here is that I think absolutely ChatGPT is going to impact the digital transformation consulting industry. I think what it's going to do is impact in two different ways that I see. And one way we're seeing it impact our business here at Third Stage Consulting. The other way I think is more likely to impact larger consulting firms and system integrators. But the one that I think I'll start with maybe the more negative or maybe the more dark side of it first, and that is the impact that ChatGPT will likely have on entry-level consultants. I think entry-level consultants are probably going to be the ones that are more impacted by ChatGPT in a negative way. And I think it could potentially create less opportunity for entry-level consultants or college graduates to break into the consulting space, because so much of the model of the big consulting firms is dependent on these young kids coming out of school and then doing a lot of the, I'll call it the consulting grunt work. They're creating PowerPoint slides. They're doing analysis and writing and a lot of PowerPoint jockeying. I guess I'd say it's a lot of, there's kids out of college that just spend their entire days and weeks at a time just creating PowerPoint slides and putting together visuals of, whatever project they're working on. In other cases, they're documenting stuff, or a lot of grunt work, I'd call it. And that's really where AI is a threat and disruption. Is it displaces that need for grunt work. Now you can use different AI tools to create a PowerPoint slide. You can give it some bullets or give it some ideas you want to have visualized, and you can have regenerative AI create that. And that's really something that Microsoft is pushing heavily into with their Copilot and some of the other AI tools they're investing in, and other providers are going to continue investing in that as well. So I think you're just going to see more displacement of lower end consulting. However, I think it also could have a positive effect on consulting, especially for more senior, more experienced people, where those more senior and experienced people can use AI to really scale and leverage their knowledge and make them smarter, essentially, like combining their own human knowledge with the artificial intelligence knowledge. And in fact, that's a thread we're going to come back to later in this episode with our guest, Noush Bayat from Third Stage Consulting. She's going to be on talking about AI versus artificial intelligence versus human intelligence, and how those two things intersect, how they collide, what the risks are, what the opportunities are. So we're going to come back to that. So stick around later in the episode. We'll dive into that in more detail. But those are a couple things to think about. I think that's, on one hand, it's going to potentially displace the entry-level jobs. I think it might displace a lot of the offshoring that the big system integrators and the big consulting firms do. So when you get into, speaking of SAP S/4HANA development, for example, there's some pretty complex development that goes into a lot of, if not most, SAP S/4HANA deployments. And a lot of that gets offshored to India and other countries that have lower labor costs than other parts of the world. And I think those jobs are at risk as well, because now you have ChatGPT and other tools that can help you create that development. They can do that development for you, or at least get you started on that and take some of the grunt work out of that development process. So that's another way I see ChatGPT affecting the consulting industry. I'll be curious to see if organizations themselves think that they can use ChatGPT to automate some of the work that they would typically hire consultants for. There might be some of that as well that I suspect that we'll start to see. But I think when used correctly, ChatGPT, regenerative AI, can be a very powerful tool. I use it pretty constantly. In fact, I started using it recently, for example, just to give me better ideas for video titles. I mean, I struggle sometimes just what to name a video. I know what I want to cover. I know the topic, but I don't really know what to name it to make it sound appealing and that sort of thing. And ChatGPT's been awesome for that. It gives me so many options, and I can usually come up with some good titles and thumbnails for my videos and things like that using ChatGPT. So that's an example where I don't know that that's not really hurting anyone's job. I'm not eliminating anyone's job or doing someone's job for them, other than maybe my own. I'm just doing my job better because of ChatGPT. So I think there's going to be a lot of that you'll see in consulting as well. In fact, ChatGPT also helped me name my book title. I was really struggling with a book that I'm launching here in a couple months, the summer of 2023. I didn't know what to call it, and I really struggled with the titling of it. We had some pretty good names, but nothing was really clicking, and I just went to ChatGPT, and within 3 minutes, I think it was, maybe 5 minutes, I was just brainstorming with ChatGPT and giving it feedback, and it came up with a title that I ultimately landed on. So I think there's just some power in it too. And again, stick around for the segment. In a few minutes, we're going to have Noush Bayat to dive into that a little bit more, sort of that intersection and that collision potentially between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. So great questions. Thank you to the audience for providing those questions. And again, if you have questions you want to cover or see us cover on this podcast, you can drop them in any of either my either my YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter accounts. You can comment on any of my videos, and we're constantly watching that and pulling questions from that. Or you can go to any of the Third Stage Consulting social media channels. Any questions you post there are fair game as well. So feel free to chime in. We'd love to get your feedback. But I also am interested from the audience, though. Drop in the chat wherever you're watching here today. I'd love to hear what you think. What do you think the impact of regenerative AI, ChatGPT? What do you think the impact is going to be, positive or negative? What are some of the specific things you think will happen as a result? I don't think any of us really know. I know I have my speculation and my predictions, but who knows if I'm right or not? We'll find out over time. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Maybe some of you have some good ideas on what you think will happen here with AI and how it will affect our lives and our world. So anyway, the great questions. Thank you for asking that. I'm curious to hear your feedback too on that topic in the comments below. So please drop that in the chat. Love to hear from you. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to come back with some of our hot topics. We're going to talk about AI and how AI could displace up to 300 million jobs. So we'll sort of continue with that thread and unpack that a bit more from a recent Goldman Sachs study that was just recently published. We'll talk about supply chain management maturity models and how that can help you with your supply chain transformation journeys. And we'll also talk about wedding technology. So we'll cover that here in just a moment in our hot topic segment. And then later in the show, we will have Noush Bayat, who is the Director of Strategy and Transformation here at Third Stage Consulting in the U.S. She will talk with me about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So really people versus technology, man versus machine, the whole collision and the coexisting and the potential conflict, all the good, the bad, the ugly between humans and technology, and sort of diving into that in a bit more. And Noush is a really interesting guest because she not only is just a great guest and very smart person, she's got a PhD. She's studied change management pretty deeply. She's practiced change management for decades now, so she'll be a great guest to have on the show, a first-time guest for us. And then we'll also have, later in the show, Dr. Muddassir Ahmed is going to be on talking about the future of supply chain management, so be sure to stick around for that. So we'll be back with some of those hot topics, but first we'll take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Thank you for joining here today. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, watch and listen wherever you prefer to listen or watch podcasts, and you can find us there. And certainly share this with colleagues and peers that you think might be interested. We'd love to get the word out to more people. So appreciate in advance you sharing this content with anyone you think might benefit from it. Some hot topics we want to cover today, some really interesting threads that my co-host Kyler, who cannot be here with us today due to her holiday, a family holiday she has, she was able to provide some interesting articles for us to cover here today. And the first one I want to cover, partly because, and I think she chose this because I recently, just last week, celebrated my 10-year anniversary with my wife. So we've been married 10 years now. We coincidentally, or interestingly enough, also just celebrated our 5-year anniversary at Third Stage, and I'm about to turn 50 years old. So this is a pretty big year for me personally. 5-year anniversary Third Stage, 10-year anniversary of being married, and I'm about to turn 50. So a lot going on here in 2023, a lot to remind me that I'm getting older too, which is a whole other story that I'll save for my therapist or another episode or whatever. But we'll the reason that is relevant, the reason I'm bringing that up is because one of the interesting articles that Kyler found for us here today is this article that talks about wedding tech. So wedding technology and how people are using technology in different ways on the romantic side of their personal lives, I guess you'd say. So this article that she pulled for us is an article that talks about a product it's called Ring. I think it's just called, if I remember correctly, it's just called Ring, or it might have a model name. But basically, it's a wedding band. So, I'm wearing a wedding band right here, just a plain old traditional wedding band. But this wedding band is technologically based, and it measures your heartbeat. So you can, I don't know why you'd want to do this. This isn't my thing, but some of you listening might like this. But it tracks your heart rate and your heart and your pulse, basically. So at any time, you can go on an app on your phone and you can see what your pulse looks like compared to your spouse's. Again, I'm not sure why you do that, or if that's just a way to feel more connected. Maybe I'm not a romantic at heart enough to appreciate or understand that technology, but it is a technology that's out there with that sort of the wearable device segment of the consumer technology space. And what's interesting is this article goes on to talk about how wedding technology and this sort of, not just these rings, these technology-based rings, but also other types of wedding technology, that whole segment is expected to rise by 21% a year. So just interesting use case about how that technology is being used. And by the way, the product is called HB Ring. So HB Ring, it's a wedding band, a pair of wedding bands that is a connected wearable device that you can share your heart rate with your spouse. Again, if that's your sort of thing, if you want to share your heartbeat, I guess that's kind of cool. I feel like the novelty might wear off pretty quickly, but who knows? Maybe there's people that are really into that. So that's an interesting thing. And that company, by the way, is based out of Europe, the company that makes the HB Ring. And then the article also goes on to talk about how much social media is being used more and more for wedding planning and for just tracking wedding activities and that sort of thing. And then it also talks about, this is pretty funny, I don't know why I found this so funny, but there's also a technology called the Wedding Writer's Block Assistant that's based on ChatGPT, and it's based on the OpenAI model, but it's a way to allow people to write their wedding nuptials, basically. So people are now using ChatGPT to write wedding nuptials, apparently. I'm glad this wasn't around when I got married, to be honest, because I probably would have done it, and I don't know that my wife would have appreciated it as much as the techno types in the audience might. So anyway, that's another interesting use case, I suppose, with technology in the wedding field. So just when you think you can't get away from technology or technology isn't changing enough, you find a case study or a use case like this where it's being used in some unusual niches in our personal lives. Technology is very pervasive in that way, in many different ways as well. So shifting gears a bit, though, and speaking of technology and maybe a less positive take on technological impacts to our lives, there was a recent report that Goldman Sachs published, and I think they published it out of Europe, their European office. Not that it really matters where they published it, but their European office published this report that said a quarter of tasks in the U.S. and Europe could be eliminated in the U.S. and Europe. So across the U.S. and Europe, I'm not sure why they just focused on the U.S. and Europe, but that's where they focused. They said that they expect that a quarter of work tasks could be eliminated as a result of OpenAI and regenerative AI. And that equates, by the way, to 300 million full-time jobs across the U.S. and Europe. They also say, however, that it could eventually increase the total annual value of goods and services produced globally by 7%. So it's sort of a good news, bad news situation. It's talking about displacement of workers, but it's also talking about productivity and the total value of goods and services that gets produced. So we'll be producing more with less people, presumably, is sort of the takeaway here. But it does go on to talk about how big of a deal generative AI is and how big of an impact that's going to have on the workforce going forward. It also talks about how the impact is not equal across different industries. So it talks about how 46% of admin and 44% of legal type professions could be automated but only 6% of construction jobs and 4% maintenance jobs could be eliminated as a result of AI. So I guess that's the good news. Of the silver lining is not all industries are affected, but for people like myself and others listening that are in white collar sorts of administrative or just office types of jobs, those are the jobs that are most at risk. And so what that does to our society is a whole nother story. And I imagine there's social scientists and sociologists out there studying this as we speak and trying to understand what the impact is and will be. But what's really interesting too is this article also goes on to talk about sort of the history of technology and how the history of workforce and workplace displacement has happened and evolved over the years. So, for example, the research points out that 60% of workers today are in occupations that did not exist in 1940. So in the last 80 years, the 60% of the jobs that are out there now are new since then. And it also talks about how technological change since the 1980s has displaced workers faster than it has created jobs. So yes, 60% of workers are in occupations that did not exist in 1940. That's the good news. These are new jobs. But more jobs have been eliminated since the 1980s. And that was really, 1980s was really when technology started to take off, and it's only accelerated since then, especially here in the 2020s. It's accelerating very rapidly. So interesting data points. I'd be curious to hear from the audience here. What do you think the impact of AI and generative AI in particular will be on workforces throughout the world, and how will that affect us as a society or as a world or as a human race? I find that to be a fascinating topic, and I'd love to hear all of your feedback on that in the comments if you don't mind. And then finally, supply chain maturity. That's a topic that is covered in supplychaindigital.com, a recent article that was published on that website, which is a good website, a good source for supply chain related technological advances and whatnot. This article talks about how self-awareness is so important for supply chain management, and that in order to begin a supply chain management journey or a supply chain transformation journey, you really need to have a good understanding of what your current maturity level is. And I think this is a great point. It's a very simple, basic topic, sort of a no-brainer, but it's really worth talking about because a lot of organizations don't do that. They want to just focus on that future state and just jump ahead to where they're going and defining that future state. Let's throw out this old, outdated way of doing business that we're doing today. Let's put in new technology, new processes going forward. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. I mean, you do need to do that. You do need to define what your future state is and where you're going. You certainly don't want to overanalyze or spend too much time dwelling on how you do things today if you know it's going to change. But you do need to understand where you're starting from, and that grounding is so important, not just for supply chain management, for any sort of digital transformation. You really need to have that clear understanding of where you are today and where you're starting from, and then ultimately where you're going. And you need to have both. You need to have that good understanding of your current state business processes, what you're doing well, what are those processes that you want to preserve and maybe build on, what are those processes that are broken and inefficient, and what are those processes that could potentially deliver the most value if you could deploy technology, new process changes, new organizational changes to support that. And so doing both is really important. And so that sort of assessment of your current capabilities and your current maturity in your supply chain, in your overall operations, in your organization, from a change management perspective, even your PMO, what kind of project management or program management capabilities do you have? What kind of technological capabilities do you have now, and where are you starting from? And then ultimately, what's the gap between that and what you want it to be in the future? And that ultimately, if you think about it, that understanding of current state, future state, and the gap between it and the chasm between it, that ultimately drives and dictates how long your transformation is going to take, what your timeline is going to be, what your budget's going to be, what the risk profile looks like, what kind of potential business value you could get out of it. You need to know that gap and understand that gap very clearly in a thorough way to be able to adequately or accurately estimate your overall transformation time, cost, duration, as well as the business value that you could expect to get out of the system, and understand the risk profile of the transformation. So great stuff, a great article that uncovers that important topic and really dives into that importance of self-awareness when it comes to supply chain management, but I would argue that it also has a lot to do with self-awareness of digital transformations in general. You need to have that same self-awareness as well. So good stuff, really interesting topic there. And we're going to shift gears now and bring on our first guest here after a quick break. We're going to have Noush Bayat on the show, who's a PhD, by the way. I think actually both guests today, interesting and coincidentally enough, both guests we have on the show later today are PhD. So I am outgunned here academically and intelligence-wise. I think the IQs of both guests are much higher than myself and probably most people in the world. So a lot of brain power coming up on this episode. We're going to have Noush Bayat, who is a director of strategy and transformation here at Third Stage Consulting in the U.S. office where I'm based. She'll be on talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence, sort of that man versus machine debate. And we'll dive into that topic. And then later in the show, we'll have Dr. Muddassir Ahmed on the show to talk about the future of supply chain management. So be sure to stick around for that as well. So we'll have Noush on the show to talk about human intelligence versus AI in just a moment. First, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology-agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO of Third Stage Consulting. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday, streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and also going live on audio podcast platforms throughout the world every Wednesday, including Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Pandora, etc. So wherever you listen to podcasts or wherever you watch podcasts, be sure to check us out there every Wednesday with new episodes. And our next guest, I'm excited for, first-time guest, relatively new to Third Stage, although I've known her for quite some time. And actually, quite frankly, I've been trying to hire her for a long time. It's been over a year that we tried to hire her, and finally the timing worked out recently, earlier here in 2023. And she's new to our team, not new to us, but new to our team. Certainly not new to the industry either. She's been doing this for a long time. Her name is Noush Bayat, Director of Strategy and Transformation here at Third Stage Consulting in the U.S. office where I'm based. And we thought it'd be great to have her on the show to talk about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So Noush, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
Excited to have you here. I know you and I have known each other for a long time. We go back a ways just in the industry, but you have recently joined the Third Stage team, and love having you on the team. And this was one of the first things you and I discussed once you joined the company, was this whole concept of the human side of change as well as the technology side of change. And then more specifically, as we were brainstorming ideas for this discussion, we really landed on this thread of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence and how the two compare, why they're both important, and how they might conflict with one another, and what organizations might do to navigate that tension. But before we really dive into the heart of the conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Noush, as far as your academic and your professional background, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Before I start, you said that people would be typing in where they're joining us from. I haven't seen anything on my screen, but I'm looking forward to seeing who's on the call and where they're joining us from. So I started my education and career in computer science, and I remember one of my first jobs was I was a computer analyst at a local hospital. And my job was to transfer their data from the mainframe computer that they had over to a PC network environment. And that was kind of the beginning of me getting really curious about human intelligence. I didn't use that term at the time, but I remember. Oh, there's all these errors that are popping up on
Oh,
my screen.
we see and hear you fine. It might be the feed, the
Okay.
chat, because don't worry, we see and hear you.
I guess more and more because the hospital was supporting the community so much. They were providing free immunization vans in tough neighborhoods. They were doing a lot of amazing community-based health work, and I was in the background making sure that their computer systems were supporting. They had the data, and the computer systems were supporting their outreach. But more and more, I was noticing that there's some people who just walked around with a twinkle in their eyes. Like it didn't matter how much money they had or didn't have, or it didn't matter what kind of life circumstances they had. There was just this sense of joy and effervescence. And then I would also notice that there were people with all the financial means in the world, but there was just a pain in their eyes and in their encounters with me. And I was just so drawn to both ends of the spectrum because at the time there was just a lot of global upheavals going on, political upheavals in the region of the world I was from. And as a young person, my heart was broken because there was just a lot of impacts on my personal life, a lot of losses. And so when I would look at someone that had that kind of sense of hopelessness and sadness in their eyes, I would empathize. Like I got it. And I felt like I was in that camp. But then when I would notice other people where they had all the hardships going on, but there was just a bounce in their steps, there was a deep engagement that I just couldn't articulate. So, much to my dad's dismay, instead of pursuing my studies and graduate studies in technology and computer science, I went the route of studying human wellness or population health, population wellness. I got a master's in public health. Along the way, I got a master's in spiritual psychology, meditation and mindfulness. Literature. Um, so I was just really, really just so drawn for years about, what is it that makes humans want to engage? And of course, most recently, I got a doctorate in organizational leadership. And what I found out or learned about neuroscience really brought everything together for me, Eric. And it really helped me to see why in the past in my career trajectory, how sometimes I was not a good employee. Like uh, despite all the perks and benefits that my company would provide, I just couldn't get engaged to the level that I was required to. And then in other situations, you couldn't shut me up. Like I would just over engaged and I was asked to dial it back. So again, all of this, all my studies really helped me to really understand what is it that's going on within us that makes us want to engage or with life's challenges and ups and downs.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a background and upbringing that was perfect for this topic today. Here, so really appreciate having you on the show here, and you're one of two people that I know of on the third stage staff that has a PhD. So that's interesting as well. So you've gone deep into the academics of this piece of it as well. So you've got the formal
Technically, it's an EDD, but so I just call it a doctorate, just to be
right.
precise. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, either way, you're more educated than I am. So perfect for this perfect for this thread here today. So I guess to start then, what exactly is for the layperson then, someone who doesn't have a deep change management background or hasn't gone deep into the human side of change, how is it you would define human intelligence and or emotional intelligence, and are they different? Are they the same thing? Maybe we can start there with just sort of that basic understanding of what the term means.
Absolutely. I mean, the field of neuroscience, and psychology these days. It's so exciting. I think like every month there's a expansion of our understanding of human intelligence, what it means to be this human interacting with the world. Of course, from just when you reflect on the ability of your body to breathe and your heart beating and your just all the things that your body is doing without you even being aware of it. So there's that intelligence that we're always aware of, so many of us. Um, the way that as a basic starting point, human intelligence was categorized into a few components: cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, music intelligence, spatial intelligence, all these sorts of things. And it used to be that I think even like up to maybe 30 years ago, that IQ was it. Like your intelligence as a human was equated to your score on an IQ test. But more and more, that singular focus on this kind of cognitive intelligence was was th- just challenged by so many other types of intelligence, like I said, and emotional intelligence was identified as this ability, or it's called EQ versus IQ, this ability of us as humans to be able to not only understand and acknowledge and self regulate our own internal emotional landscape, but also be able to cue in on other people's, or in a social setting, kind of understand what is the um, what's everybody feeling, just to be able to um, understand how to intuitively relate to them. So this ability to be able to build relationships, have empathy, um, be able to take a tech technological challenge, but be able to actually talk about it with somebody. That's kind of a brief summary of what I call emotional or human intelligence. Just all these capabilities that enable us to interact with the world and solve problems. I think in its most general, I think that's human intelligence for me.
Right. We're here with Noush Bayat from Third Stage Consulting talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, where we stream the new episodes every Wednesday. You can also find new episodes every Wednesday on audio podcast platforms throughout the world, including Apple Podcast, Google, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, etc. So wherever you listen or watch, check us out there. We're here in the middle of a conversation with Noush Bayat talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So let's jump back into the conversation. Why do you think that this is so important, this whole concept of human intelligence? Why is that so important in today's day and age of advanced technologies and artificial intelligence and all this great stuff that could potentially, in theory, replace or mimic human intelligence? Why is human intelligence so important, or is it important? I guess we could start there.
Absolutely. I think it's so critical because from what I understand about our brains, there's a huge component of our brain that supports us in predicting the future. So there's for us to feel at ease, it's when our brain is able to predict what's going to happen. You know, we wake up and we know that there's coffee in the kitchen, that I'm going to go open my computer and it's going to work well. So there's this predictive capability of of our brain that allows us to feel comfortable um, surviving and interacting with the world. What happens with technology and technological innovation, especially when you bring it within an organization, is that all of a sudden it's not a cognitively stable environment. And with that, I mean it's very complex. And what that means is that there's no linear causality. There's no way for our brain to fully wrap its hands around this technological innovation. One of the words that I learned when I was in grad school was VUCA, VUCA, which was coined by uh, the, the American, our military once the Cold War was over and we no longer had a singular enemy to focus on. And they said, now our enemy is VUCA, which means conditions that are volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. So uh, this kind of conditions, which is uh, our daily realities these days, being able to, you know, we go into a client setting and they bring us a challenge, but there is no singular answer that's going to fix every challenge that they're going to bring up. The level of complexity and the level of intervening factors and unpredictability, even in their organizational setting and culture, it's so much that because our brain can't just say, yep, the problem is X, the solution is Y, and our approach is Z. End of conversation. Because we can't do that in today's environment of technology and innovation and organizational complexity, what happens is that our brain literally sounds an alarm and feels threatened. So when it can't find that linear causation and find that the cause of instability, it it raises this alarm. So our fight or flight stress response gets activated. And so often people that their defense mechanisms come up. They get guarded, they get stressed, their stress hormones come up. So that's why um, in these situations, especially in these times of complexity, technical skills aren't going to help us. Because technical skills is when you go into a training environment and they tell you, if you press this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. But in times of complexity, because there is no clear pathway to our solution, and we have all this crazy stress response going on within us, this kind of emotional turmoil, for lack of a better word, what's really required are adaptive skills. Skills where you can actually be able to show up to a meeting where everybody's frustrated and they want you to fix it with a magic pill, to be able to take a breath and self regulate your emotions, be able um, to challenge that part of your brain that wants to fix it so fast, because our brain loves to do that. It loves to keep going really hard and labeling situations. However, this kind of fix it mentality in complex situations is really is really tough because there is no fix it approach. In these times of complexity, one person can't just come and fix the situation. The person that you paid a lot of money to and hired, they can't just go to their room, come up with a strategy and push it down. There's going to be resistance, there's going to be pushback because the situation is so complex. One of the the researchers whom I followed a lot at MIT, he called this dynamic complexity, where our sense of the problem is unclear, our sense of the solution is unclear, and the people impacted, our sense of the stakeholders is unclear. So he called this dynamic complexity. And again, in these situations, our brains and our emotional state, they're just not happy because they can't just, our brain can't just label it and be done with it.
Mm.
What's required is these adaptive skills of taking a breath, slowing down, being comfortable in the face of such a complex situation, and being able to bring people together so that you can iterate ideas. So when things speed up, being able to slow down and actually listen and collaborate and not have a fix-it approach, but basically have an iterative and incremental approach to this issue that your brain wants to fix so badly.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super interesting. So that's a interesting overview of the human side of change and why it's so difficult. I love that was I love that the acronym. What was the acronym again? Was it
VUCA,
VUCA? And tell us again. It's volatility.
unpredictability, complexity, and ambiguity. So volatility just refers to this crazy pace of change that's going on. Unpredictability meaning you make your plan and you think it's going to give you one outcome, and then it gives you a completely different outcome. Complexity in that there is no clear causality, or there's so many cause and effects that you can't just narrow it down to if A then B. And then ambiguity, just the fog of, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, there's all of a sudden I feel a fog coming on everybody, like, what exactly is it again?
Right. That's funny.
One of the researchers I love to follow, he called these kinds of challenging problems wicked problems as an actual technical term, meaning wicked problems don't have one solution to fix it. They're so complex and they're not going anywhere. And they require you to actually just manage and meet that situation instead of try to fix it, because it's
Mm.
not going to be fixed, and it's not going away.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, we'll stay focused and centered on VUCA here today as we
Okay.
go through the conversation and with that in mind. And that's a great way to think about why not only why the human side of change is so important, but also why it's difficult. Why is it difficult for people to adapt to change? And I think that VUCA acronym really describes that well. And it's a good reminder of some of the complexities that humans face, or that we as humans face when we're going through technological change. What I want to do is just turn to the audience real quickly and look at where some people are joining from today. We had a few people comment on where they're joining from today. We have Ryan from Denver, Sam from Spain, Laik from Atlanta, Georgia, Joel from New Jersey, Peter from Raleigh, North Carolina, HA from Cairo, Europe. So there's a couple or I'm sorry, not Cairo, Europe, Cairo, Egypt, I should say, that HA Hashab is from. So thank you for being here today, those of you that have dropped in the chat where you're at today. And if you have questions along the way, anything related to the human intelligence side of change or just organizational change in general, would love to hear your comments and questions. And I'll kind of get through my initial questions, and we'll turn to the audience as well. So I guess as we dive into this, then why is you've done a great job of describing just what human intelligence is and what some of the complexities of human intelligence are. As it relates to just overall business change, whether it's digital transformation or any sort of transformation for that matter. But in general, why is human intelligence so important? It might be assumed, or we might be able to speculate based on what you've said so far. But how would you describe or summarize why it's so important in today's day and age of technologies?
Absolutely. Well, the more we step into learning and artificial intelligence and all the amazing things that AI is providing us, from what I understand, it's kind of like the garbage in, garbage out that my professor in my first class in computer science told us, that, this is a box. You put garbage in and you're going to get garbage out. And so from what I understand about artificial intelligence, machine learning, is that to the extent that we feed it accurate data, to the extent that we validate the learning process of the machine, that's the extent to which we're going to get benefits from artificial intelligence, from machine learning. If we can't bring our full human intelligence to the table, if we can't draw on the institutional knowledge that our people have about their processes, about their industry, about their competition, about the best ways to move forward, if we can't draw on that, if our people are overwhelmed, if they're stressed, if they're guarded in these defense mechanisms, we're just not going to have accurate validation of any of this data that we're getting these machines to learn. So if I feel like, if we're not able to fully tap into our own emotional intelligence, human intelligence, and really be able to manage the overthinking that happens, this kind of this stress response that comes over us when we're faced with complex situations, that literally in a way shuts us down. When our stress response is happening, our capabilities to learn, Eric, are really hampered. If we're in this overly stressed, overwhelmed situation, it's really hard for us to learn. It's really hard for us to calm down and actually face the situation that we're facing. We're so caught up in the meaning that we're making about the situation instead of actually being able to face it. So again, if we can't bring our full human intelligence to program these machines, to get them to do what we're wanting them to do, um, I would be scared about our future, because these machines, they're just not going to give us what we were hoping that they would provide.
Yeah, without that missing secret sauce, if you will, of
Absolutely.
human side.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of confusion in terms of, oh my God, machines are going to take over, as if they're inherently intelligent and they're just going to take us over. And I think that feeling of overwhelm, that feeling of like, oh my God, that's the end of life, it gets us to shut down and want to just be in denial and not want to learn what the hell is machine learning, what is artificial intelligence, because we all can learn about it and we all can make really intelligent decisions in collaboration with our team members. However, I think because of the volume of information out there on the internet, the volume of misinformation, fake information, so we get so overwhelmed. Our system gets so overwhelmed that we'd rather not know or tune out than to actually understand what the challenges are, what the issues are, and how do I develop my team to be able to deal with this.
Right. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from the audience too. Why do you think human intelligence is so important? In what do you think the biggest complexities of human intelligence are? I'd love to hear feedback from the audience as we continue the conversation here. But that's a great overview that you provided there, Noush. We're here with Noush Bayat from Third Stage Consulting, talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing landscape of digital transformation? Then you need our newly released 2023 Digital Transformation Report. This comprehensive report covers the latest trends, technologies, and strategies to ensure your digital transformation is optimized for success. The 2023 Digital Transformation Report is packed full of proven methodologies and insights from experts in the independent digital transformation field. You'll also receive practical insights on how to implement digital transformation strategies within your unique organization. This free report is available for download on our website at thirdstage-consulting.com under our Thought Leadership section.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, where we stream the new episodes every Wednesday. You can also find new episodes every Wednesday on audio podcast platforms throughout the world, including Apple Podcast, Google, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, etc. So wherever you listen or watch, check us out there. We're here in the middle of a conversation with Noush Bayat talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So let's jump back into the conversation. So as we look to you were starting to allude to this a little bit, Noush, as we got into as you described why human intelligence is so important in today's advanced technological era. But in addition to that, what are some of the consequences if I'm a leader in an organization and I don't focus enough on human intelligence or emotional intelligence, and I focus too much on technology? I'm sort of myopically focused on just making the technology work from a technological perspective. What are the consequences, or why is that a problem in today's day?
You really, I'm sure we all have those times when we remember where we got so stressed that we literally couldn't do our jobs well. I definitely been in situations like that where I was even asked to leave one of the organizations that I love so much just because I would get so stressed about my ability to perform well, that instead of taking that breath and bringing my human intelligence to deal with that stress, I would tune out and check out. And so I was perceived as not a good member of the team because I just couldn't get past my overwhelm. I couldn't get past my confusion. I couldn't I couldn't even bring myself to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Could someone teach me this? Because just the sense of overwhelm and the sense of that imposter syndrome. I think in our organizations today, executives and people across all the levels were asked to deal with so many situations in our places of work that are so novel. And it's so easy for us to, of course, experience overwhelm and confusion and all the stress response, the increase of stress hormones, our heart palpitations, our increased blood pressure, all of this. And if we can't find a way to self-regulate that, and if our organizations keep piling up change after change after change without really understanding what it is that their humans need in order to be well, we're going to lose our most capable people. We're going to lose the brain trust of our organizations. People are literally going to say, I can't figure it out. I'm just going to check out. They're either going to stay in the organization and really derail any effort there is for progress, or they're just going to leave. And there you have it. Your people with the most passion, with the most heart, with the most industry expertise, who can help you get to that next phase of technological innovation, you've just pushed them over the edge. And that's not just because some people can't deal with stress. That's the human thing. And it's impacting all of us, from little kids to our elderly. This overflux of change, this over, this, what's the word I'm trying to find? This, just this change overload. and this expectation that we should be able to get up and fix it. And our lack of ability to fix it, um, and our lack of ability to be able to talk about the fact that one person can't just fix it. We need to come together and listen and collaborate and brainstorm. The lack of ability to do this is really harming a lot of our workforce. You know, stress rates, anxiety rates, depression rates, suicide rates are really at an all-time high right now in our country.
Great point. I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about is just how hard it is for people's lives in general, outside of work, and then you come to the workplace and then you throw all these changes and stressors and triggers on top of people, and it can certainly add up for certain. So that's a great point. So here's an interesting comment from the audience here. This is from Urtaza on LinkedIn. I hope I pronounced that name. I probably did not, so I apologize if I didn't. But the comment here is human intelligence has the common sense factor, which AI sometimes lacks, or somewhat lacks. So we talk a lot about ChatGPT. That's a common topic today. It's a hot trend right now. It's a hot buzzword in the technological space, and it's a hot tool being used by a lot of people. And it's interesting to hear or sort of see how these two worlds are colliding, that human intelligence with artificial intelligence. But, how can artificial and technology ever replace common sense, as Urtaza mentions here? What are your thoughts on that, or your comments, your reaction?
I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't know. What I do know is this incredible miracle of being human, this ability to experience so much stress, our brain, the capabilities of our brain to help us through so many difficult situations, and then also this ability for us to have presence and wisdom, to be able to love, to appreciate, to have empathy with each other. I think those are qualities as humans we don't even know what that is. I mean, you've been in situations, we've all been in situations where someone has treated us with what we've perceived was utmost disrespect and cruelty. And you can feel what it does to you. You kind of contract and you want to get away from them. And it's like it throws you off in so many situations. Like, what is that? What just happened? And then vice versa, you're in a situation when there's lots of love and compassion and empathy. And all of a sudden you feel like you're coming up with amazing new ideas and innovations. And it's like, what happened? Like there's just so many subtleties to human ingenuity, to human interaction, to love, really, to love and compassion that, I mean, I think from what I understand so far, it's like machines can learn patterns in our behaviors so that if they observe me interacting with a child, they can say, oh, you have to say this to a child to get them to do this, and your tone of voice has to become kinder, or this and that. But is that really empathy? Is that really love? Is that really compassion? Like, I know that computers can have this incredible computational ability that humans can never, I don't think, have right now as we speak, this ability to crunch vast volumes of data. But can they bring that love and compassion and human presence to it to determine what to do with it? I think that part of it, it's still, we're teaching computers that. We're teaching AI that capability, but I don't think will it ever be organic? I mean, will a machine ever organically realize that they need to love or bring compassion and respect into a situation? Uh, I don't know. I'm I'm guessing not, but you never know.
Right. No, it's a great point. I'd be curious to hear what the audience thinks on that debate or that question. Speaking of the audience, here's a really interesting comment. It's a two-part question that I'll play here, or I'll show here from Jerry on it's either Jerry or Gary. I apologize, I'm not sure which, but on LinkedIn, um, Gary says today's words that are considered to be able to create harm and be violent. Now we have computers that can say words. We as humans need to get over our fear of words. But then there's a second part here. The human condition will kill innovation in the AI space. There's a lot of fear about what machines might say.
Absolutely, Jerry, or Gary, that's such a great point, which goes back to my what I was bringing up earlier in terms of being able to self-regulate. Emotional intelligence is so critical right now to be able to notice our reactive tendencies towards things that we don't understand and to have it be normal,
Right.
to understand that human defense mechanisms or uh, our tendency to get reactive in the face of things we don't know and to want to shut down, those are so normal, and to be able to breathe through it and not take that seriously, not be so overwhelmed by it. So that in so much of my executive coaching work that I do, that's such a critical part of supporting executives to move through their days and make the decisions that they have to make by understanding that being human is really this dance between this reactive survival brain that we have that hates anything that it doesn't understand, and this part of us that's full of wisdom and presence and innovation and creativity. It's really a dance. We can't be 100% in one or the other. It's always a dance. And to be able to understand that subtlety of how we interact with the world, that when there's something that I don't understand, that all of a sudden I notice my heart rate increasing, I notice wanting to just crawl under the covers instead of say, all right, team, let's get together. Let's throw some ideas at the chalk. At the board. Let's see what we can come up with. Um, this ability to not freak out by our own freak out, it's really important to have compassion for our tendency to freak out, but not take it so seriously that we can't become present to our challenges, or all these, like you said, Jerry, these amazing opportunities to innovate. Um, so that self-regulation, that understanding of our neuroscience is so critical.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. And it's a great question and a great response to it too. So thank you for the feedback, Jerry. Um, so what about one thing you and I have talked about in our time working together has been um, how the divide between human intelligence and artificial intelligence and just technological advances in general, how that chasm is growing. The technology is becoming more and more advanced, but we as humans, we're changing, but we're not changing nearly as fast as technology is. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what should we be thinking about as it relates to that divide between the human race where we are today, and yes, we're evolving, but not nearly as fast as that exponential, accelerated advancement of technology. How do we navigate that? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's the thing, when we're feeling stress, a little bit of a stress is great in terms of enhancing our ability to learn, right? Like this live cast, the invitation to show up here, it caused a lot of stress for me. But that stress, I utilized it. It was good. I was like, okay, let me go through my thoughts. Let me understand what I'm going to talk about so that I sound somewhat decent, and you don't fire me tomorrow. So that little bit of stress is very healthy. That kind of stress gets us to study hard for an exam, to get prepared, to get excited. However, when that level of anxiety and stress, and to various people it's different, it goes overboard, it really inhibits our ability to learn. And I think that as machines are surpassing our capabilities to learn, which is a okay thing, it's like, yeah, let machines learn all these things that are going to take me years and years and years to learn. However, how can I show up and interact with that machine learning so that I can bring my human intelligence, I can bring my insights, and I can put that machine learning to good use? I think that's the divide that we really need to address. What is that? What is it with it within our human condition that can create so much stress that makes us incapable of even wanting to interact with the complexities that machine innovation is bringing to us? So I think I keep going back to being able to do to have that level of emotional self-regulation, and not only that, but really being able to make sense of the world. You know, our brain loves is a storyteller. It loves to make meaning out of the challenges that are happening so that it can engage with it um, in the brilliant ways that it does. But if our meaning making ability gets diminished, if I'm putting a meaning on everything as, this is going to take my job away, I'm never going to be able to do this, like this, our capabilities of making meaning out of in stressful situations. If we can't making ability, that story making capability that we all have, we're not going to take our organizations to the next levels, because organizations are about the culture, are about the vision, mission statements that they have, are about the meaning that they create in the world. And if their people um, um, are at that brink of stress and anxiety, that they cannot bring new sets of meaning to the challenges that they're making, um, I think we're not going to get as much out of machine innovation and artificial intelligence as we hope that we can get.
Yeah. We're here with Noush Bayat from Third Stage Consulting talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
A man decides after 70 years that's what he goes there for.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, where we stream the new episodes every Wednesday. You can also find new episodes every Wednesday on audio podcast platforms throughout the world, including Apple Podcast, Google, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, etc. So wherever you listen or watch, check us out there. We're here in the middle of a conversation with Noush Bayat talking about human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So let's jump back into the conversation. Has an interesting comment. He says that AI will not take jobs. Humans using AI will take jobs from humans. What are your thoughts? Do you have any predictions as it relates to that, Noush, as it relates to
Absolutely. This? There's so many thought pieces coming out these days from so many of our think tanks that I think even here at Third Stage that, yeah, maybe remedial jobs are going to be taken over. Maybe that data cruncher no longer needs to spend 40 hours a week crunching data. However, when that machine can do it in 5 seconds, then we need that person with maybe a different set of skills to interact with that AI, right? So I don't think that humans will be um, uh, completely taken out of the job market, but new capabilities for sure that we have to learn as humans in order to be able to interact with this amazing um, data crunching power, for lack of a better word, or data mining that the machines and AI bring to us. I think new jobs are going to be created as a result, honestly. Certain jobs will be taken away, but definitely new jobs will be brought to the forefront. And to be able to validate the output that these new machines that are taking over jobs, in order to validate their output, there's going to have to be that human intervention to say, yep, this machine did it right, or no, we have to fix it. So I don't think you can get rid of humans, but we definitely have to continue to learn and grow. And I think when you look back over human evolution, we've had to do that at various, what do you say, epochs in our evolution. We've had to learn new things. So it's not the uh, end of our. Uh, it's not a bad thing to have to evolve and learn new skill sets.
Right. Yeah, that's well said, and I agree with you. It's not a bad thing. And here's an interesting comment from Sam on LinkedIn, and Sam says, "To get the best from AI, do we need to learn to be better at asking questions?" And I think this is a fascinating question or comment because it sort of plays to the whole emotional intelligence and how can you use emotional intelligence or human intelligence to make AI more effective. Do you see that being the
Absolutely.
case?
That's 100% Sam. You're so spot on. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about adaptive skills. You need adaptive skills in conjunction with your technical skills to be able to maneuver through this world of complexity where there is no linear causation. And adaptive skills are exactly that, our ability to be able to slow down, take a breath, have craft better questions in order to engage, bring people together to be able to understand what is even our questions, what is our starting point. So these adaptive skills are 100% so critical these days.
Right. Yeah. Great question, Sam, and even better response, Noosh. So thank you for that. What about employee and organizational wellness? You talk, and I think you alluded to this a little bit as we were talking before about stress and the VUCA acronym that we talked about earlier. What are some of the ways that constant change and the advancements of change in general and the organizational change in general, how is that affecting the wellness or lack thereof of organizations and their employees?
I mean, we we interact with organizations 24/7, at least 8 hours a day on calls with our amazing clients and our amazing teams. And we know that executives and everyone in organizations are really suffering these days. There is so much disruption and change going on. There's such a fast pace to need to quickly re-strategize, quickly roll out something so that you don't fall behind the curve, so that you can stay competitive. And we're brought in those fires, as you know, we're brought in to provide organizational change management strategies. It used to be back in 2005 when I started in OCM that there was just like one change, and we we organized all our efforts to that one change, and it was called that point of change was called the Valley of Despair, where you had a dip in performance, and all our efforts were to really mitigate that dip in performance and support the people to navigate through that dip, that valley of despair, and go back on track. There was one new technology, or there was a culture change, or there was a merger, like there was just one change. But honestly, over the past 5, 6 years, there's just, it's like these Russian dolls. There's like change on top of change on top of change. We're brought into an organization to support them with their technological change and adoption. And all of a sudden you see that, oh my God, there was a merger and acquisition here. There's this technology change there. There's just so much happening at the same time. So I think one of the ways that organizations have to deal with it is to really tap into the human intelligence in their teams, really bring them along, not just force changes on them, but really bring them to the table. Bring your frontline people to the table. Create these coalitions across the agency where you can learn from the human intelligence of all your teammates, because the challenges that executives are facing to be competitive isn't something that they can just figure out behind closed doors anymore. They have to tap into the human intelligence of their full teams. And if there is a technological change that they want to go through, or a cultural change, then it's the human intelligence of their full organization that's going to help them to bridge that gap. Because these days there's not just one valley of despair, there's just despair, period.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much, and you don't know which change you're trying to mitigate. So tapping into that human intelligence and bringing the people to the table so that they're co-owners of taking the organization to the next level. They can bring their insights. They can bring um, their influence, their peer influence, to really support their people to bridge, move through these transition states.
Right. Yeah, great point, and very well said. So we've covered a lot here in terms of the fact that technology is changing so quickly, and how the impact affects employees and organizations, and why human intelligence is so important. And in some ways, it can be overwhelming to think about all this stuff. It's a lot to take in, especially when, like I said before, a lot of times we're more focused on the shiny, cool technology. We're focused on the things that we can see and touch and feel. So given that it is so important, human intelligence, and it is so complex, and it's hard to get our head around at times, what are some of the best ways to really start addressing the human versus technology issues in an organizational change strategy and plan? So as we're planning for change, what is it? What are some ways that we can get started, or some tangible first steps that we can take to?
Absolutely. Well, I would say to anyone who has that power to give the go ahead to these huge tech innovations, it's, really think twice about your aggressive timelines. You and I both know we've been in so many tech implementations where they started out with a very aggressive timeline, but their business functions, they just weren't able to um, understand the new business processes fast enough. So implementation had to just get pushed, or they had to press go live, but the organization was just in disarray because their people couldn't understand their business requirements fast enough. So I think one of the first things is that think twice about your aggressive timeline. You think you have to go live in 3 months, but do you?
Right. And what are the consequences of doing
Do
that?
you? And can we phase it? How can you, again, bring your people into the conversation, that even if you have to go live in that in 30 days or in that crazy aggressive timeline, that your people are with you. You can't just say anymore, this is what's going to happen. You have to either learn it or leave. Well, I mean, if you do that approach, which a lot of organizations, it seems like that's their last approach, you're going to see a lot of good people leaving your organizations. And sometimes organizations use that as a way to clean house, unfortunately, to let go, to have people self-select out so that they can bring new people on board. But if that's the culture of your organization, then you're going to burn those people out too. You're going to have such high turnovers that you're just not going to have people who are the carriers of your culture. You're not going to have people who are going to stand by you and be loyal and really breathe passion into your mission and vision. So yeah, think twice about your implementation timeline, bring your people on board, start to have those conversations, bring value to what people understand is their business requirements. So often we want to just dive into change impact analysis, but it's like, well, if I'm pushing this change onto my, let's say, my warehouse unit or my sales team, like, let them talk to you about what are those business requirements that they need. What is it that makes them successful today? Like, they're able to talk to their customer quickly and efficiently. They're able to give them a quote, kind of like they've done historically, very quickly. That customer feels heard and understood. Okay, if that's a business requirement, how can we preserve that no matter what technology is brought? How could we bend technology to help us preserve that business requirement? So often, like you said, I think um, software vendors, they want us to bend our mission and values and business processes to fit the technology. But if we can bring our full human intelligence to those conversations, we can actually have a nice dialogue with our software vendors saying, hey, you're telling me that this out of the box functionality is the only way, but is it? you know and if it is, well, we need to have a phased approach so that we can find workarounds, because we don't want to give up this business requirement. So I think we have to have more of a conversation instead of an arm wrestle between our technology and our and what makes us be successful businesses in terms of meeting our customer needs.
Right. Yeah. Well said. And I think that that's a great way to start. I mean, I think that's what we have to look at is how do we start this journey? How do we start to, at the very least, think about the human side of change and the organizational change side of things. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. The whole idea of the importance of change management, why people side of the equation is so important. But we're getting pretty deep into this here as far as that human intelligence piece, which is so critical for sure. Well, good. Well, I want to thank you for being here. Time flies when you're having fun, and we're already up against the hour here. So thank you for being here with us here today, Noosh. Really appreciate it, and definitely appreciate the audience being here as well today.
Thank you so much. And before we sign off, I just wanted to say something that happened in my own team at third stage over the past couple of weeks, where there was something that I said that was misinterpreted by somebody. My intentions were misinterpreted, and we were able to come to the table and have some intelligent and emotional conversations around it, so that we could help to resolve whatever that challenge was so that we could get to the work that we're trying to get, which is technology and supporting with people with that adoption. And it didn't go past me how important that was, that my boss was able to bring his human intelligence into the conversation, that all the parties were able to come to the table, that whether we were reluctant or not, we were able to be able to say, hey, I'm feeling some stress around this situation or that situation, and how can we bring our humanity into this conversation so that we can resolve it? There's like hundreds and thousands of these instances that happen these days in the workplace as organizations are trying to go to their future state of technology innovation, and being able to slow down and bring our human and emotional intelligence into the workplace so that we can build bridges of understanding. We can build strong relationships that can withstand the turmoils that are in our way is really critical. And I'm so happy that I'm in an organization that really lives those values and is able to model that every day.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, Noosh. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. A lot of good stuff we covered here, and we're going to take a quick break and unpack a couple of the themes that we discussed there with Noosh. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
When things are big that should be small, who can tell what magic spells will be doing?
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing landscape of digital transformation? Then you need our newly released 2023 Digital Transformation Report. This comprehensive report covers the latest trends, technologies, and strategies to ensure your digital transformation is optimized for success. The 2023 Digital Transformation Report is packed full of proven methodologies and insights from experts in the independent digital transformation field. You'll also receive practical insights on how to implement digital transformation strategies within your unique organization. This free report is available for download on our website at thirdstage-consulting.com under our Thought Leadership section.
Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday, streaming to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. So be sure to check us out wherever you listen or watch the podcast. So we just had Noush Bayat on the show talking about man versus machine, human intelligence versus AI, sort of that debate that's been ongoing for years now about will technology eliminate our jobs? How can we coexist with technology? Can we coexist with technology? All that good stuff. And what's really interesting is this whole debate. I remember even when I was a kid, I grew up in the 80s, right? So I was moved to Colorado, in southern Colorado, a really small mountain town when I was 7 or 8 years old. And when I first moved to Colorado, my parents both coincidentally got jobs at Digital Equipment Corporation, which is no longer around. They no longer exist. They were acquired by Compaq years back, and I don't know what happened to them since. But moved to Colorado, they got jobs at Digital Equipment Corporation, which was based in, or they had a big office in Colorado Springs, which is close to where I grew up. I grew up in a small town up in the mountains, about 20 miles from Colorado Springs, a town called Woodland Park, and they worked at Digital, and I remember, it was all about computers and supercomputers. The Wang supercomputer was sort of like a big thing back then, and Digital themselves made big mainframes, big computer systems. And I remember, just the fear that I sensed as a kid that these computers are really cool, and I was always fascinated by computers and technology. But I also thought it just seemed a little scary, like, oh wow, these robots and computers and stuff like that could really eliminate our jobs. And so I just, a young age, and I think a lot of kids of the 80s, grew up with that sort of, I don't know if it was fear, but it just became such a part of our culture. Robots and sort of that futuristic sort of stuff, like Terminator came out in the 80s. A lot of computer-based, stories about technology, good and bad, that sort of thing. So something that's really been around for, most of my life, right? Ever since I was a kid, I remember this fear of technology, but it seems to be back. It's sort of like with ChatGPT now and AI. Though for whatever reason, that technology seems to be freaking people out more than, say, ERP systems might have, 20 or 30 years ago, or other types of technologies. There's always been sort of an underlying fear, and every organization goes through it. But I think it's just a sort of a stark reminder that, the undercurrent in society is sort of a general fear. And of course, we talked earlier in this episode in the Hot Topics, we talked about that Goldman Sachs study that predicted that 300 million jobs could be eliminated as a result of AI just in the US and Europe alone, not to mention other parts of the world. So, that certainly doesn't help people's anxiety levels or stress levels or fear levels or whatever the case may be. And so I think it's important to recognize that, and recognize that no matter what you're going through as an organization, when you're going through digital transformation, people are going to have some sort of underlying fear. And it may not be in the same way that I have, because I grew up in the 80s and my parents worked at a technology company. That's my own thing. But every organization and every person within an organization is going to have their own baggage, if you will, their own fears, their own stressors, or their own anxieties about what's going to happen to their job. And so it's really important to recognize that and to be cognizant of it, that you have to assume that even the best intentioned people are going to have some sort of fear. They're going to have some uncertainty, and they're going to have some doubt as to what technology is going to do to them. And they may fully be on board with the idea of deploying technology and going through digital transformation because they know it can help an organization. So on the surface, they're on board. They think, okay, I get it. I understand why we're deploying technologies. But then when you really start to dig deeper and peel back the onion of that person's job, of my job, and now you're telling me that you're going to automate stuff, you're going to change and disrupt my daily life, that's where I start to freak out. And so I might still be on board with the long-term vision and the plan for digital transformation within our organization, but now that it's affecting me and it's getting personal, that's where I start to resist, and that's where I start to freak out or not be as on board as I should be to be as supportive as I could be for the project. So those are the kinds of things you have to think about is from a change management perspective. How do you bridge that gap? And how do you address that undercurrent of fear that many organizations have? And I think this conversation with Noush really did a nice job of really explaining and helping us understand how the two can coexist. I love having Noush on the show, and I love working with Noush because she's such a positive person, and she has such a positive view on just life in general, and certainly professionally has a very positive view as well. And so I like how she's able to unpack this in a way that isn't solely fear-based. It recognizes the fears and the doubts and the uncertainties around technology, but she talks about it in a way that really dives into the positive of it and how we can coexist and how technology and humans together can be better than what we might be, without both. So really interesting stuff, and appreciate having her on the show for sure. So we'll hopefully have her on again soon, and we'll cover more people and human-based stuff as well. But we're going to shift gears now and bring on our next guest, who is Dr. Muddassir Ahmed, here to talk about the future of supply chain management. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. My name is Eric Kimmerling, CEO of Third Stage Consulting. You can find new episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, so be sure to check us out there, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. So our next guest is actually a previous guest, or this interview was one that we published on this podcast over a year ago, I believe it was. But it's a really good conversation, worth revisiting, especially because we did talk about supply chain management earlier in this episode. We want to build on it a little bit more and just talk about the future of supply chain management, where it's headed. So we had a chance to interview a while back Dr. Muddassir Ahmed to talk about the future of supply chain management. So let's roll the clip and we'll play you that clip again to dive into the future of supply chain management.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been watching your TikTok videos and your YouTube channel is pretty fantastic. So thanks, great to be connected and you get me on the show on your Tuesday podcast. Looking forward for discussion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for being here all the way from Dubai. So you're based in Dubai, and maybe just before we jump into the questions I have for you to start, and any questions that the audience might have, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe a little bit about your background, and as well as what SCMDOJO is and what SCMDOJO does.
Yeah, sure. So start from myself because SCMDOJO is kind of linked with my background as well. So I'm an engineer by trade, originally from Pakistan, then went to Sweden, did my master's in management of production and supply chain. This is where I basically get into the field. But I always thought I have a research mindset, and now I got a PhD scholarship on a couple of schools. So I choose Lancaster University Management School, went as a PhD scholar, and I was working for a company called Eaton. So it was like a kind of funded project. And then Eaton said, why don't you work full time with us and we'll fund your PhD? I said, yeah, that sounds good to me. So basically, then I worked for Eaton, is an American company, from 2005 until 2017, and I did a lot of jobs, almost all the jobs in supply chain, buyer, demand planner, materials manager, supply chain manager, manufacturing manager, logistics director. I've done all of that, hands up. Then when I finished my PhD in 2015-16, I realized there's not a lot of practical content. So, there was a lot of content out there from we call it this inbound marketing people, social media influencers, especially on the digital marketing people, top 10 ways how to improve your LinkedIn profile, or, top 10 people to follow in wherever. I just realized that there's not enough practical content for the supply chain because it's very much descriptive. And being a supply chain person, I realize also that if you think about these standard chartered bodies like Apex or SIPS or ISM, I mean, they've done, all of them have done a great job, but they just push theory so much. But if you go into the field of supply chain, theory is important, theory is relative, is a hygiene factor, you need it. But what makes you differentiated from your competition or your peers is how good you are in understanding technology and how good you are understanding the people side of this. If that means your leadership skills, your communication skills, your networking skills, managing up, managing down, so on and so forth. I come up with this model of I want to write a content which is helpful for the supply chain people, because basically whatever I've learned in 12, 13 years in industry. So I started with my own name, Muddassir, that was a blog. For example, I started writing things like 18 ways how to reduce inventory, or 25 different interview questions, because I interview a lot of people or gave a lot of interviews as well. So it resonated with people. And then I think 17, 18, one of my bosses moved to Dubai. He was the head of Bridgestone, and he said, why don't you come for us? So I was the head of planning and operations for Bridgestone. So when I come to Dubai, actually, people started inviting me into a lot of conferences as a speaker or etc. And I just realized I should change the brand into something more useful. So hence the birth of SCMDOJO, July 2018. Dojo is a Japanese word which means place to stay and meditate. So it's coming from this whole judo karate background. So the vision of SCMDOJO is to help supply chain functions and supply chain community to do better in their job. So, and what I mean by to do better in their job and solve problems. So, for example, if you're looking for courses, we have a best-in-class tutors here. We have on-demand courses I have a course on SNOP, sourcing, modern warehousing, and we have recorded about 27 courses which will be going live. What is very interesting we have is the best practices. So, for example, if you want to have a SOP of how to do stock take or cycle counting or plan for every part, or basically your boss asks you, oh, let's improve our KPI, supply chain KPI dashboard. So all of them you can come to SCMDOJO, you can buy, you can download, you can customize, you can look very good in front of boss. I don't mind. Actually, you can sell it as well if you like. I don't really care either way. Right. So we got a lot of best practice content, and we also have a lot of self-assessment tools which management consultants sell it for thousands of dollars. So for example, one of the famous ones I have is the materials management competency assessment, which got around 11 categories, 78 different questions. So if you're a supply chain manager, supply chain director, or supply chain or professional in general. So if you want to know how good you are into all dimensions of supply chain material management, you can go to SCMDOJO/tools, conduct the tools, and then it will give you a spider chart at the end. It will tell you the gaps you have in your knowledge, and you can improve. So We have a lot of self-assessment tools, a lot of best practice guides and content. And our aim is to become platform. What I mean by platform is it's not just me, because 11, 12 different contributors, and the idea is to have people like you, Eric, and any other supply chain leaders and expert listening to this podcast come and join me, contact me, and will you have an as an expert, so you can, we can help you distribute your own knowledge into some kind of product. So our vision is to become the go-to place for supply chain community when it comes to knowledge, content, and access, and mentoring as well.
Yeah, that's great, and it's a great model, and I think you've identified a significant need in the marketplace for that practical knowledge. So that's pretty cool that you started it, and the timing is certainly good. I'm sure you didn't know ahead of time back in 2018 that how important supply chain management would become and how much of a buzzword it would become.
Agree. Just to add one thing and credit to you as well, because thanks to COVID, I find COVID pretty interesting actually. It has given two things to us. First of all, it forces us to watch videos. So my YouTube channel has gone bigger, and maybe yours, so we talking to each other. And second, it has proven that a lot of supply chain functions, in supply chain we manage information, right? Mostly to manage materials, to manage the money back. And we can do a lot of supply chain jobs remotely, right? Which gives us access. I mean, look at this conversation. We connected digitally and we're talking about it. So I am totally firm believer that supply chain has become global for last 2-3 decades anyway. But I am a firm believer that supply chain jobs will now also become global, very much like what happened to IT industry.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even more so over time. And I'd love to hear too from the audience. Thank you for everyone who dropped in the chat where you're from, but I'd love to hear sort of what your role is, just for people that are joining us live here. Are you in the supply chain field? What is your role? Are you a consultant? Are you just interested in supply chain management? I'd love to hear from the audience here in terms of how you fit into the supply chain world and sort of what your interests are. But as the audience is answering that question, another question for you, Muddassir, is what do you see as the biggest challenges in today's supply chain environment? Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's pretty well aware of supply chain bottlenecks and breakdowns and disruptions, but what do you see as the biggest issues just based on your experience in the supply chain?
I'm going to give you a short answer, but I'm going to give you a long answer later on as well, right? Because I think it's important to go back. The
Sure.
short answer here is, if you see the three V's of supply chain, the visibility, velocity, and variability. So we clearly have a big issue around the visibility. I think we all agree to that part as well, right? And which leads to the how we want to make our supply chain more agile, more faster, more, from the velocity perspective, right? Well, one thing we are not trying to focus, we should focus on how we're going to reduce the variation in our processes and how we do business, right? And I think if we just focus more on standardization of work, standardization of best practices, standardization of operating principles within your supply chain organization and within your extended supply chain, both with customers and in downstream and your suppliers upstream, it will definitely going to give you a better way to first increase the velocity and second improve the visibility. So somehow I tend to see there's less focus on reducing the variation of how you do business or how you run your supply chain, right? So I think there's a more focus required in the variation part. That's a short answer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So what are the three V's again? So visibility, variation, and velocity.
Visibility, velocity, and variability. So our aim in supply chain is to increase the visibility from upstream to downstream as much as possible, right? Our aim is to increase velocity of both information flow and material flow as quick as possible, because that's what we want, right? We need everything like super agile, now and Amazon style. And our aim is to reduce variability wherever possible.
Right. So when you look at that 3V model, then how is that different, or what has changed within those 3Vs just in the post-pandemic world and this supply chain constraint we're in?
Because see, when the pandemic hits, it has caused basically a tsunami of disruptions, right? When it caused the tsunami of disruptions, that means now everybody needs to know where's my container, where's my beds, right? That has aggravated a huge amount of focus on visibility, right? But then, if you think about the processes how you used to run before, your SNOP, your inventory management, your demand planning, your supply planning, it has been disrupted. and you don't have the, let's call it, process agility to deal with those disruptions, right? Because there's a variation in supply chain now. Call it bullwhip effect, call it whatever, right? But how you have basically redesigned your processes, or how you make your processes agile enough to cater with those variations, right? Okay. Now,
Right.
last year nobody was getting an antenna. Then, because as soon as the lead time goes wrong, what people do? Let's order more inventory. Everybody's ordering more inventory. Now, if you're in the market and asking people, everybody's saying, "Oh, I don't have a good sellout because I've got too much inventory." But you should not be ordering in the first place, right? You should be focusing on the lead time rather than ordering more, right? And this is what I'm
Right.
talking about, right? Is this knee-jerk reaction of the situation, rather than saying, let's take a step back. We know what has happened, right? And then think about what is the right course of action, right? Ordering more inventory because you just got a long lead time may not be the right thing, because you don't know what's going to happen 6 to 12 months down the line. You might not be able to sell it, and that's actually what's happening right now.
Right. Yeah, that's a great connecting the dots of sort of the three V's being relevant throughout supply chains at any point in time, but sort of how it applies to today's supply chains too. We're here playing you a clip of an interview I did last year with Dr. Muddassir Ahmed talking about the future of supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. We're here playing you a clip with Dr. Muddassir Ahmed chatting with me about the future of supply chain management. Let's jump back into the conversation.
One more thing I want to add on this. So if you go back to the history and evolution part, so supply chain, and this is another important, I think this is also good for supply chain. So supply chain was never considered as a strategic function before COVID. And I think we all agree to that in some different nuance form, right? So supply chain was not even a word until 2000, right? So if you see the history of supply chain, it was like transportation, then 60s was distribution, then it was materials management, and then logistics management in 1990s, and then 2000, the supply chain has born, right? But from the 2010 onwards, so if you go to SCMDOJO, I wrote a blog on evolution of supply chain logistics. The COVID has accelerated the digitalization of supply chain, I think, by 5x, right? It is faster and faster than it. If the COVID would have not happened, we probably won't be focusing on it. But now, because COVID has happened, now there's a huge push on supply chain digitalization, both integration, both upstream and downstream, either cloud solutions or ERP integrations or whatever, right? Is to have a better visibility of the demand patterns, right? Which again, I think is turned out to be a good thing for supply chain strategically. So there's a focus on digitalization, there's a money on the table. That's why you are expert on it. That's why I watch your videos, and I think I do the same thing. And I think that's a good thing, right? What do you think about that, Eric?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's sort of accelerated a trend that was already starting, but it's fast tracked it, and it's exposed. The pandemic exposed a lot of weaknesses and deficiencies in the supply chain. I think maybe we were fortunate for 10 or 20 years to have pretty stable supply chains, especially with globalization. And, it took a long time to build these global supply chains that worked really well in a predictable environment. But in an unpredictable environment, we were finding maybe it doesn't work so well. Maybe we need to rethink how we have the visibility and the variability in our processes and all that stuff. So, and that's a way digitization can help all those, the three V's that you talked about.
Yeah, and that's the future. That's essentially the answer of this conversation, right? The future of supply chain. The future of supply chain is going toward more digital and building both digital competencies for your supply chain and for your people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And here's a question from our audience, actually, that your response there was a perfect segue into this question from Roger on YouTube, and I'll put it up on the screen for those that are watching. But are supply chain implementations using SAP or NetSuite doing Agile? It's been a few years since I've done these implementations. Everyone was still on waterfall or a hybrid approach. And back to your point about digitization and use of technology in supply chains, what are your thoughts on this, especially as organizations have these knee-jerk reactions that you talked about, and they're trying to do stuff quickly? How do you see Agile fitting into supply chain transformations, or do you see Agile fitting in?
I definitely see Agile fitting in. That's what it is designed, because the more digital we get, that means we are more getting into the best practices developed in IT industry. That, I mean, I'm trying to make
Right.
it easy comparison, but I think it's a relevant comparison, right? Because what is digitalization? So I asked this question actually pretty much. So what is the difference between digitalization and digital transformation? And it is astonishing that everybody says the same thing. But no, because I'm a researcher, right? I'm an academic guy at the same time. I want to differentiate the definition. There's a
Right.
clear differentiation. So my watch is basically a digital watch, but it used to be analog, right? So I made something analog to digital, right? Digitalization is then if I start producing data like health data, right, which is asking me to run more or do something, that means that is digitalization. Digital transformation is using technologies digital technologies to improve your internal processes or provide more value to a customer. That is
Right.
digital transformation. So if you think you are digitalizing, yeah, you're using digital data to create more data to change some behavior, but you're not really changing your business model. If you're not really changing your business model, then you're not doing any digital transformation. So now with this very specific definition, I'm going to answer the question, right? So because again, we're talking about IT, so agile will definitely work. So everybody should learn agile. Everybody should know what is MVP. Everybody should know what is wireframing, because you all should be doing it. I can promise you that. If you don't know what is minimum viable product, if you don't know what is wireframing, start learning, right? It's all those terms. I've done a digital transformation project within Bridgestone. It was a success story, big time. I've learned that by doing it. So I'm promote this concept more and more, right? So buy a book called Lean Startup by Eric Ries, fantastic book. Okay, now if you Google right now, anybody sitting on a laptop, why ERP sucks, you should find SCMDOJO blog number one. And since you are an ERP expert, Eric, right? I mean, I think you should read that and give me your critical commentary.
I
One
will.
of
That's
my
good.
yeah, so one of my critical commentary in that blog is, it's an old blog actually, 2.5 years old blog, that what ERP has done, even with SAP HANA. I never use NetSuite, so I'm not going to go down the NetSuite way because I don't know that ERP. Well, I know SAP, right? They've come up. They took this enterprise cloud, sorry, enterprise ERP, put them into the cloud. It still have this bloody same T code and bit more business analytics, and you can do some queries. I mean, I used to use Cognos 10 years ago. I used to write queries before in BPEX. So writing queries is not a new thing. So what is new actually? So my biggest criticism is following. ERP is the biggest database for your business, right? All your sales data, your planning data, your orders data, everything is there. Your routing data, everything is there. But why ERP right now is not smart? And I don't want to swear it because I don't know a lot of people there. Why it's not smart? It's not smart enough to give me my predictive analytics, my prescriptive analytics. Why in this age I have to download all my planning data, then do my inventory optimization, made to order, made to stock analysis, and then decide to reduce my sales? SAP should have those ML AI rules built in and should be suggesting to us, right? Okay, you put a safety stock in, you're not selling, change it, right? Or convert this made to stock item to made to order item. The rule should be defined. So my biggest criticism is the ERP is still very much an old school ERP. It's just on the cloud, right? There isn't enough intelligence built in to drive digital transformation. So, okay, they have digitalized it, but still ERPs, the new ones, are not enabling businesses for digital transformation. And I'm happy to debate with anybody on this topic.
Yeah. What do you think that is? Is it just outdated technologies? Is it the wrong focus from companies that are implementing the technology, or what is it?
I think I think they're too big. It's too big. SAP is too big. I think we see the. I mean, you probably know more than me on this. If I'm not wrong, the top five ERP players cover 65% of the market, right? Between SAP,
Oh,
Microsoft, NetSuite, Oracle, right? and
yeah.
and they got so much, they make so much money in doing what they're doing, they probably don't need to. So I personally think there is a disruption required in the whole ERP market in itself. So ERP was a database with a fixed flows. I'm coming up with the theory of why don't we create a product which is workflow based and connected with databases. So you can actually have a more, let's call it flexible workflows, which is linked to whatever database you wanted, and now you can do whatever after that. So I think there's potential of doing it if you think about it differently. Oh, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing the link actually. Yeah. Okay, somebody shared the link as well. Kyler, thank you.
Yep. And our marketing team just dropped in the chat the link to the Why ERP Sucks blog. And now I'm going to have to go read it. Now I'm intrigued. I want to know what your what your thoughts are on that. So I'll be sure to share some feedback with that too. So that's interesting because, so just to back up for a second, then with this whole ERP versus today's supply chain issues, it seems like ERP and back to the original question, by the way, related to Agile versus waterfall, ERP in many ways is built, it's a big, massive integrated system, whether it's SAP or NetSuite or Oracle, any of those systems. It's a big, massive integrated system, which in some ways you think, well, a fast way to deploy it would be to use Agile, but they're just so broad and integrated and it's hard to do. But supply chain challenges today might require more of an Agile approach where you've got to fix some immediate pain or address some immediate opportunity that you have to improve your supply chain. Would you agree with that, or is that sort of what's pulling?
I 100% agree. So I left Bridgestone in October, but before that we were working on SAP HANA, and if you see the deployment plan was agile based as well. So you come in, you do your scenario planning, then you have an agile run, then you sit down with the consultant, and then they fix what they fix, and then you have a next agile run, right? So
Right.
it's definitely the way to go. Yes.
Okay, good. So here's another question. This question is from Raphael on LinkedIn, and he makes a comment that I currently work in a distribution factory. The pandemic definitely exposed our weaknesses in communication.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, is that something you've seen, or is that something you've seen that can be resolved potentially through technology and or organizational changes, or how do you see organizations dealing with this sort of dynamic that Raphael talks about here?
So I need a bit more elaboration from Raphael on the what do you mean by communication, like internal or external or market information? What exactly
Let
you mean? So
let let's talk about, let's assume it's both, internal with our
yeah,
own visibility into what we need internally, but also as with our customers as well.
yeah. So it's down to the point you make earlier, is this whole change of how we used to do business and run processes, very established supply chain and a way of communication, right? You send a PO, somebody acknowledge, don't acknowledge, they ship stuff, and whatever. You used to have a face-to-face meeting with your colleagues, you go and see them, any issues you sort it out. But if you're working remotely, then getting five people on the call at the same time is a ball ache, right? Because you have to make sure you send an invite, and then somebody dog is barking, somebody got some kids crying or whatever. So it is getting difficult, right? So both communication internally and externally is difficult with the supplier, right? But there, if you think about it, more and more tools are available right now. WhatsApp for business and Slack. I mean, Slack is $30 billion company right now just because it's a fantastic communication tools, right? So communication is an issue, definitely, and therefore the new communication apps are coming out, both business applications and both personal applications at the same time.
Right. Right.
Put this, I never used Slack before. I know Slack, I knew of Slack, but I only started using it was just a better and faster way to communicate.
Right. Right. Okay. What when you think about, I'm going to ask one more question related to supply chain in general, and then I might shift gears and talk about careers in supply chain.
Yeah.
But one question here is, how should organizations be rethinking their supply chains today? In other words, how should they view their supply chains? How should they be focusing on improving their supply chains today versus pre-2020, pre-pandemic? What's changing in that?
So good question. So I would say when I see supply chain, I see in four dimensions really, right? I see in four different dimensions. Four. I have a actually very famous talk on four pillars of supply chain strategy, which is people, process, system, and execution, right? So when you're designing your supply chain and you're looking post pandemic, so you need to look into really start from the people. Do we have the right people? Do we have the right competencies in place to do what we need to do, right? So you can't really say I'm gonna digitalize everything in my e-procurement and supply chain, and you don't have a people who actually understand cloud. I'm just saying, right? So you really got to understand how cloud works to go any digitalization effort, right? And believe me or not, most of the supply chain people doesn't come from any IT background and they don't understand cloud. I mean, using cloud application doesn't mean you understand cloud, by the way, right? Yeah. So I'm just giving you an example. So how you upgrade them, how you want to coach them, how you want to mentor them, how you provide them the right knowledge, right? Okay, maybe. So that's one thing. Second thing, you need to look into your existing processes. One of my biggest bugbear of digitalization and again moving to the supply chain is you can't digitalize anything unless you have a standard process in place. You got to standardize to digitalize. So you need to start looking into it. Okay, we have had a standard process before, which is now disrupted post pandemic. We got new challenges in place. How are we gonna reshape and redesign our processes? Let's standardize those. Let's write it down. Let's write it down a better way to communicate. Maybe SNOP we used to run once in a month, maybe not good enough. Let's do twice a month, right? For example, right? Because there's more frequent changes. So process change. Then you need to take those people skills and processes and need to fit around the existing system, whatever system you're using, right? So you can't change the system overnight. It's expensive commodity. You got to, but you need to make sure the redesign processes are somehow configurable around the systems you have, or you need to buy a new piece of kit, or maybe develop your own. And then move to the execution part, which is probably the most interesting tip I can give you today. People hang up too much around, too much talking, too much discussion, too much time and effort in listing down a lot of action and not enough time on execution. And this is where I love the MVP theory. That what they say is you design a bare bone of the functional product or a process, then you test it out, give it to the user, right, and get a feedback, and then develop on it. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you want to drive change, improvement into the new challenges, don't come up with 200 different actions. Come up with like top five. Design that what you're actually going to do. Come up with the aggressive timeline and do it, and learn it and fail it and do it again and add more.
Right. Yeah. It's another case for the agile approach to transformation is being able to quickly deploy solutions that'll help the supply chains in today's environment. Now, shifting gears a little bit, then, how about careers? It seems like supply chain would be a great area. If I were starting straight out of college, I think supply chain management would probably be the thing I would do personally, especially today. What do you see? What are the trends in supply chain management careers?
100%. And I will actually ask our friend in marketing to go again to my channel, Kyle. So if you go to my channel, there's a video called "Why Supply Chain is a Great 7 Reasons Why Supply Chain is a Great Career Choice." So if you Kyle can share it as well on my YouTube channel, I think it's the main video. So I think it's a fantastic career choice right away for many reasons. Apart from all the good things you already mentioned, there is a plenty of job opportunities around. It's a focus area. Now we have a seat on the table into the function. People even used to don't think supply chain as a function. If you ask people right now, marketing everybody knows, sales, HR, but people don't used to think supply chain as a function, right? But now supply chain is a function. Everybody knows it, or we are telling people. So that's good. Jobs are good. Money is good, right? And the best part I would say is we are almost. I'll give a football analogy. So we are almost like a central midfielders, right? We can go back to defend if we want to. We can be attacking field. So we are connecting the football in the field, right? So we're talking to marketing people, finance people. We're talking about product management people. We're talking to IT people. You cannot implement ERP without IT, without us, really, right? And essentially, ERP is the IT system. The point, thank you for sharing. Paris has shared it as well. So the point is, don't have to. If you don't like supply chain, that's okay, right? Spend 2-3 years. You can go to marketing, you can go to sales, in fact, you can go to operations. I've done a job of manufacturing. So it give you a many easier way to maneuver within the business, right? Even I had an analyst, he has a bachelor's in statistics. He worked with me as a supply chain analyst, didn't like it, moved to finance. So you can move to finance as an analyst, you do whatever, right? So this goes. The second is give you a growing opportunity. I mean, which is the biggest company right now in the world? Apple. Who's the CEO of Apple? Tim Cook. Who is this guy? He's a supply chain guy. So you can become a CEO as well. Historically, you either have to be a sales guy or you have to be not. I should not use the word guy. Salesperson, salesman and woman, or financial man and woman to become the CEO, because that's like the almost a criteria, or MBA. You don't have to do now. You really don't have to, right? So you can be an engineer or supply. You can become a CEO. Another thing is, I have traveled about 38 countries, and I can tell you this: out of 38, 30 are company funded. I go to a lot of places, and thanks to supply chain, I go and see suppliers, I see customers. That's the other reason. The third thing, second last would be supply chain is never boring. There's always a flipping separate problem every day, and quite funny ones, right? So one day, quick story, I turn up to as a supply chain manager, and people said, "Oh, we need you on down in the warehouse." I was like, "What's the emergency?" He said, "There's a guy, he come on drunk, and he's on the forklift truck driving, and he's just asking you." I was like, "Why he's asking?" He was just drunk and he's driving. He just was asking. So I went to go down and take him out of his forklift truck, right? So, I mean, can you imagine that would be a problem in your workplace? But you face things like that. And I think lastly is supply chain is great fun. It's great fun. You can learn new things. It's not boring. So I can sell supply chain to a schemo. Yeah.
We're here playing you a clip of an interview I did last year with Dr. Muddassir Ahmed talking about the future of supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear the things you want to feel? I'll give you energy.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Just inside of the nothing that's
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 121. My name is Eric Kimberling. Find new episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. We're here playing you a clip with Dr. Muddassir Ahmed chatting with me about the future of supply chain management. Let's jump back into the conversation. I can't think of another discipline other than maybe IT that is such an integrated discipline where you can learn, you have the opportunities to specialize in procurement or logistics or certain parts of supply chain management, warehouse management, whatever it is. But you also have to understand the whole big picture of how it all ties together. And I think that's something that's super cool about supply chain management. And the other thing too that I'd add is that, to what you said, is that I always look, whenever I think about, giving advice to people for their careers, one thing I always think about is, where is their disruption? Where is there massive amounts of changes happening? Because that's where the opportunity is. And so now, they're being disrupted. And these supply chain disruptions, they're not going to get fixed no matter what politicians do or no matter what we do. It's not going to get fixed in the next few months or probably even the next few years. It's going to have a ripple effect that, it's going to affect organizations for years to come. So I think it's definitely a up and come, or it's a not up and coming. It's a very well established discipline, but I think there's going to be high demand for it for years to come.
Agree. And just to add to all the points both of us said is, so what happened to fintech in the last 20 years? Fintech has gone phenomenally, right? And what happened to digital marketing? So if you are a marketing person right now, you would not be the same marketing person 10 years ago, right? Because the marketing was different 10 years ago. Same with finance. But if you think you're a supply chain person right now, you won't feel you could do a job 10 years ago, because there's not enough disruption between the decade. But what happened is, with the disruption of pandemic, the importance of supply chain has grown massively. And there's a huge amount of money has been put into startups. There's a lot of big startups are coming in. There's $87 billion has been put into supply chain startups. All those supply chain startups are bringing disruption. Some of them will survive, some of them will die. But even the ones who will survive will create more job opportunities, will create different job opportunities, right? Which does
Mm,
not even exist right now.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think if you also look at sub disciplines or areas of uh, specialization within supply chain, you have, data science. You were talking about visibility and the ability to make use of data. If you have an interest in supply chain and technology, data science might be an area where you could sort of carve out a niche for yourself. Or if you're a business process type of person, helping re-engineer business processes. If you're a change management person, helping manage supply chains through their change and the human component of it. So, and then obviously on the technology side, you have, applications that are meant to improve supply chain. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. And then of course you have the internal functions like procurement or logistics or warehouse management, where you could specialize in doing the internal functions of a supply chain too. So there's just a massive amount of opportunity, and it's a global thing too, like you said earlier. So very, very good stuff. If I were new to supply chain management, or if I'm not in supply chain management and I'm either just coming out of college or maybe I'm mid-career and I want to make a change, I'm interested in getting into supply chain management. What are some of the things that I could do to break into the supply chain discipline? What would you recommend to someone who wants to make a pivot or a change into supply chain management?
Yeah. First of all, visit SCMDOJO. That is exactly what we do, right? We are here to exactly help you with this transaction. You will find a huge amount of content, knowledge, guides, best practices, videos, mostly free actually, to get yourself ready. I mean, there is a blog of top 3 jobs of a supply chain graduate, or what to do, how to find a job for a graduate, and we got plenty of content there to do it, right? So the first thing you do is that. Second thing you got to do is to start. One of the dilemma people will have is, I have no experience, where to start? And my suggestion is this: as long as you got some level of degree and you can do some level of analysis, right? And that's a great place to start, right? Is to inventory analyst, planning analyst, business analyst, right? You go there, you don't have to know the business or anything. You just need to know how to use, any tools like Power BI or Google Data Studio, or even Excel. You should be good in Excel, right? So you start from there, and then after 12 to 18 months, as soon as you understand the business and business model and the product, then you can start moving into more into planning or procurement or category, warehousing, wherever you want to move, right? So that would be, I think, the ideal start, I would say. But the thing is, I wouldn't even do a lot of expensive courses. I wouldn't say. I mean, as I said, we have a very subscription based model. I mean, you pay me $49 and you can have access to all the courses and things like that. So it's not a huge, you can Google anything, you can find it as well. So a huge amount of information is available. Just use the information, find a time for learning, because what generally I've seen it that when you graduate, you somehow think, okay, I've done everything. Now I'm gonna focus on practicality. It doesn't mean stop learning. I would say making learning is a part of your half an hour, 1 hour daily regimen. I do it every day. I still do it after 20 years from graduating. So make sure you continue to learn.
Yeah, it's great advice for any discipline that you might be in.
Yeah.
What about if I'm already in supply chain management? Perhaps I'm already in one of those roles you just described, and I'm
Right.
just looking to further my career or advance. What would you
Cool.
recommend? Anything different for those types of people?
No, not really. I think the only thing I would say to that, in addition to the SMDOJO people, because if you go to our tools and self-assessment, we have created best practices. It may not make any sense to any graduate or young people who doesn't really work, but it will make huge amount of sense to anybody who has worked in supply chain, and they have existing problems and they want to looking for best practice to solve it. And that is our aim, solely to provide those best practices to help them do it. If you don't find any, if you're looking for something, ping me. But this is our core competency. We create best practices. We try to do proper research. We have a team behind it to make it available for people. For example, right now I'm creating a very comprehensive dashboard for warehousing and logistics. Right. So the procurement one is pretty famous. The KPI supply chain one was very famous. I'm creating a full, for example, dashboard for SNOP. Okay, you can run SNOP in super expensive software, but you don't want to buy it unless you have a SNOP software. So I'm creating a dashboard to help two people run SNOP on Excel. And once you have a process, then you go and buy a fancy software, no problem.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's good advice. Here's a comment that I want to get your thoughts on here. And this is from Richard on LinkedIn. He says, it's no longer a supply chain, it's a supply marketplace, which is a very different risk model. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you heard or that you agree or disagree with?
This is a very advanced concept, right? And I think it's a very, very interesting, it's more a comment rather than a question, right?
Right.
So first of all, I say I agree, right? And I agree with my recent learning of a conference I attended. There's a what's her name, Dr. Eloise. She is writing a book, not coming out, and she's talking about the risk part in terms of supply chain, how the rules of war has been changed, right? So, for example, I think she has a very conspiracy like theory. She's saying, if I'm your if I want to damage you, are the suppliers I work with, I know you are 400 suppliers, your supply chain risk assessment is so weak that I could become your supplier, for example, and I could really damage your credibility and you won't even know about it. Right? And
Right.
and then she gives some military examples how I don't want to go into the book and what she gave examples for, that how America and few other people are really I think some military example where it was a deliberate effort by a country to become a supplier for the army to make sure they damage their supply chains and not to make the armors. I don't know how she get hold of this information, but there's
Right.
2 3 things she mentioned which is pretty realistic if you think about it.
Interesting. So what exactly is maybe I'll turn that comment into a question, but what exactly is a supply marketplace and how is that different from a traditional supply chain? How would you describe that or simplify that for the audience?
Yeah, I would say from the let's do this. So historically, the global supply chain was a success story, still is if you think about it, right? Apple is very successful because the way they designed the supply chain. Amazon is and or was, right? So market, I would say, what is the marketplace? The marketplace is there's more than one player, right? You're competing for same business. So when I say I'm at SCMDOJO is a marketplace, what I mean by that is I have more than 10, experts right now. You can pick one, right? You need to evaluate and you have to pick one and you have to more deal on a case to case basis and the project to project basis, right? So this model is pretty reverse to the whole concept of strategic SRM, supply relationship management. If you pick any book of ISM or SIPs, they keep talking about strategic partnership, strategic supplier, strategic collaboration, strategic this, strategic that. Then you have to be very so. But marketplace model is actually on the other scale, right? So if you sell the other scale and it's disruptive, it is successful and it's proven, right? Which it is, then why it will not be proven in supply chain? It comes with the risk, but it just needs a more robust platform to manage, and that's what we aim to do.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I can see that being a trend in the future or a way that further transforms or further disrupts traditional
Yeah,
supply chain.
yeah. Let me give you examples. So right now, okay, we talked about analyst, right? Analyst is data science, very good, important skills, right? Or supply chain network design, right? For example, everybody wants to do supply chain. You have to look into your supply chain and see you have the right warehouses into right places with the right workflow center of gravity. But why would you want that skill in-house? I don't think you need that skill in-house because you don't do this kind of analysis every month or every week, right? They are
Right.
very specialized set of skills, right? So I mean, you are an expert in ERP implementation, and the cleanup of the ERP data is specialized skills. Is a specialized skills. No, you can't have it in-house. So my
Right.
point is those kind of specialized skill set is a marketplace jobs where boutique consultancies or boutique experts are available. You can go and get them and then hire them to do whatever they want to do. With the same thought process, you can apply to material purchasing or technology purchasing, right? So with the same can be applied, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Interesting. So I guess just to bring this all full circle and sort of bring the whole discussion around supply chain trends and supply chain careers, just to close the loop and sort of summarize everything we've talked about, what closing advice would you leave for supply chain practitioners and others that are affected by supply chains? What advice would you give them as they look to the future of their careers as well as the supply chain in general?
Cool. Can I share my screen? Maybe not, right? So okay, let me just give me 1 minute. If you can give me one. Can I just take 1 minute or 30
Sure.
seconds?
Yeah, please do.
Right. So I'm gonna show you something which will answer the question more appropriately than me waffling about. Where is this picture gone? Okay, good. Is this possible? I can share a screen here. Possible? No.
You should see a share screen button in the bottom right of your below where you and I
Right.
are listening.
Cool. Right. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. Can you see?
Oh, I have to accept it here. 1 second. There we go. Yep,
Right.
we see it now.
Can you see now? Okay, so this is my theory, which I'll be trying to push it through. So if you're in supply chain, you have been in supply chain, that means you are have some level of supply chain competencies, right? So we call it I call it hygiene factor. You have it anyway. If you don't have it, you got to learn it, right? Otherwise, you're not in supply chain. Then
Right.
the second factor is your people skills, which I mentioned in terms of your communication skills, presentation skills, negotiation, managing up and down. It also involves your social media skills somehow. So if you go to SCMDOJO right now, we have a course on how to improve your LinkedIn profile, actually. Because right now, if you're applying for a jobs, people actually Google you first and call you for interview later, in fact. And when they Google it, they're expecting you to have your profile on LinkedIn, right? I
Right.
actually, in last 3 years, never call for anybody for interview unless you're in LinkedIn. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
biased, maybe I'm not, but that's what I do, right?
Right.
So having a very nice LinkedIn profile, which is better than your CV, is there. But we have a course for that. The third part I would say is the technological know-how, all the emerging technologies, right? Understanding what's happening in the technological space. If I come back to my picture again, so everybody using these buzzwords of IoT or basically they're using blockchain, 3D printing, blah blah blah, right? But you need to know which application is used where,
Hmm.
right? You need to know that which part of the technology fits into which part of the supply chain. So IoT is more connected devices, give you more visibility, more data. If you're thinking about the security, transparency, blockchain. If you're talking about collaborative supply planning, you need to know about cloud a bit more. If you're thinking about predictive and prescriptive analysis, you need to know data science. The point is understanding the technology and which and where it is used in supply chain. And that's the final answer. That's the book I was talking to Eric, I think, before our talk, right? So I'm writing a
Right.
book on supply chain standardization for supply chain managers. 80% done. Hopefully, it will be out this year. And the whole purpose of that book is to give this lessons or not lesson message to people that understand the technology and try to link with the right portion or right segment of the supply chain.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, that's good. Good advice.
Yeah. So just to summarize this, so as a supply chain competencies right now in itself, I think is 1/3 of your skill set, maybe
Hmm.
40%. You got to improve your people skills, right, to be grow in your job. Because okay, if I'm not a better leader, if I'm not know how to lead people, if I don't know how to manage projects, right, I'm never gonna become a supply chain leader or manager. It's just not going to happen. I just stay what I do. So you got to become those kind of all things. But then if you really want to grow further and improve your supply chain, you got to understand technology. So you need all these three things. And the dilemma I feel in the current curriculum is pick any. They're not really focusing on the two part. They're not focusing on the people part as much, and they're not focusing on technology part as much. They're still going about supply chain competencies, which I think they are doing a great job, but it's old school right now. We should move on.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that that's a good visual, the discussion of those three areas, those three competencies, because so many people want to focus on one. And you can have a primary area that you're strongest in, of course, but the more you can focus on developing all three of those areas, I think you're just going to be in higher demand and you're going to be a more rare find within the industry.
Yeah. There's a question from Kohan I see. It's an interesting question. I can answer quickly. What is the best visibility solution in the market for a multi-factory, multi-country, multi-year? There's a company called Project 44. Google that.
Project 44.
Project 44, yeah.
Okay, that's
They're
good.
worth
Okay.
right now $1.7 billion is a startup.
Okay, it's great question and great advice. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to go Google that as soon as we're done here. All right, good stuff. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Great conversation. We love having that conversation. Always a good fun topic and a relevant topic in supply chain management, so appreciate having you on the show. So lots of stuff we covered here today. We're out of time, but I want to thank you all for joining. Appreciate all the great engagement and questions. Again, be sure to check us out every Wednesday with new episodes. So wherever you're listening or watching right now, you'll find us again next Wednesday. So be sure to check us out there. I want to thank you all for listening. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Transformation Ground Control.
Major Tom.